thank you for the comments at the start about the semantics being interesting already. And our focus is specifically on a real business case. So learning how to speak sustainability. Last week we covered data manager. I covered this week. We'll be covering data citizen as well. And what we do want to say is that this business case is live and running. So we can guarantee we have lots of lessons, and we would really appreciate a lot of input and comments from your side as well. Next.
Esti,
Howard?
could you explain what fall off your bike means? Or is that a JG one? Is that a JG?
That might be a JG one.
I'll pick that up when I introduce the client.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay, cool. So first handing over to Howard for some essential concepts.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, all right. Okay, great. So this is sort of what we went through last week. So I'll try not to repeat it repeatedly. So this was what I like to just explain to people, the continuum of our semantic meaning and how we go up the list, starting off from folksonomy, free text tags. That's sort of the thing where we started off with SharePoint. Of course, it's got a lot smarter, and there's people like Roland Ross that actually develop taxonomies to go into SharePoint to help you, but that's where lots of us, and that's where we understand with SharePoint. We then go into controlled lists, and as we go up, we go to taxonomies, ontologies, and I really believe our end game is getting that ontology into the graph database so that we can mix and join our metadata with our data. So the ontology becomes data, and we can link it to our existing data. Now, that helps us with inferences and all sorts of stuff. And I actually should take a step back and ask Paul to just check, Paul, PG, parental guidance. I know we had a discussion on this last week, and I just wanted to check that, are you comfortable with why we felt that it wasn't in Neo4j, and what the difference is, and what this whole ontology into graphs is all about?
Yes, I think what I got to this point before, so Howard, and then I said, okay, I got it now, and then I realized a week later, I still actually don't quite get it.
Okay.
But what helped last week is just when you said that when you have content in something like for Neo4j, but you bring something completely different in the taxonomy to actually help categorize that stuff that's already in the database, and that sort of brings it to that level. That was helpful for me.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, and it's taxonomies and ontologies, and there's a lovely diagram that we will be showing today that I found really helpful to position this power. And I think what we're also saying is, Esti did a great presentation on Monday to basically say that we're moving from data modeler or data architect to data ontologist. And now it's really helpful to be able to get the work that we do in building that language into the machine, be it machine learning, be it knowledge graph. But I'm just so grateful that all the work that we've been doing in Irwin, Idera, Power Designer, all those type of things, we now can make it executable, which for me is fantastic. That's that idea of it just sitting in the designer and not being effective as metadata. That was always a level a bit of disappointment, or you spend all this time and you don't get it. Okay, so moving on. So these are the important elements. One is that's okay. You can go on. We sort of saw that on the previous slide. Controlled vocabularies, and I think I could get Zelda to present on this because she heard all about it. Not so, Zelda?
Yep, just saying it looks familiar.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so controlled vocabularies, this is what it's all about. We have different levels of controlled vocabularies, almost from just a standard list or a taxonomy, as we showed, all the way up to an ontology. And the nice thing about a micro-controlled vocabulary is that you can almost grow a area or a facet of the taxonomy on its own independently, and you can bring these things together. Now, if you really want to, there's some fantastic work done by oh shucks, his name's gone out, but the data-centric architecture, where he puts together a core ontology, and then by each domain he extends the core. So let's say we have a banking ontology, we have something like fiber, then you can now go and extend that core to be for credit cards or check accounts or whatever it is, and then you grow it, but you constantly map it back to the core. Fiber wouldn't really work as a core. It's too big, but that's the idea. Okay, and if we move on. All right, so here's my lovely semantic chain. You've seen all sorts of comments on LinkedIn today. Notice just an adjustment that controlled vocabulary is referring to all of these: glossaries, thesaurus, enterprise data model, taxonomies, ontologies. So these are the types of controlled vocabularies. And down the bottom here is the type of technology that you would use to manage this. I think we may have some animation on that, Esti. There's your technology, there's your vocabulary, and it's lovely to see that. And then almost what we saw there, Esti, you saw in the ontologist skills, these are the type of things like XSLT, XML, an ontology, an OWL and an RDF could be in XML. So there's a standard representation of that. So good to understand all of that. And of course, what we're trying to see at the end is that knowledge graph. Important thing is, as we progress up, we get strong semantics, stronger semantics. There is more time in learning that and understanding and building that. I know that we've got people like John O'Gorman that are doing a great job with Q6 and extending on the Zachman ontology. So he's adamant that it doesn't take as much time and money as you think, and it's a lot better. Now, and again, I think we mentioned last week that he's happy to almost offer a beta testing or training on his new Q6 deliverable. So we wait for that. I'm looking forward to it. I know Esti was looking for tools as well when she started this journey. So, okay, if we go on. And I think we just keep going, Esti. This is really just a view on what we can do. This is how we'd ingest a document, tag it, link the concepts together, coming from a document and moving forward. If you go forward there. Now, this is what we have in terms of a multifaceted taxonomy. So can you see this controlled activity is the overall taxonomy, and then we've got facets: customer, region, product, goal. Some of them are nice, true hierarchical taxonomies, like region. Africa is broken up into north, east, west, south, dropped off. And same in America. So they've got North and Central, and South America drops off. There's something funny about this taxonomy. And then you've got a product, which is a laptop, and a laptop's made up of a CPU, and they're all the different models. So this is sort of how you can piece everything together. On the right-hand side, there's a really nice product called Top Quadrant. It allows you to build a taxonomy like this. So here in the blue is the ontology. Okay, and if we go forward, this is how they bring it together. So a normal property graph or instance data looks like this: BMW X2 228, and that's what we have in the graph. Now, when you bring the ontology and you link them together and you use that typing, every node that you identify, you'd want to find a link to a type so that you can start the navigation process. If you can't find it, that's actually quite exciting, because we're saying, oh, there's something that we've seen in the data that our model doesn't support or we don't really understand. So that's actually a really iterative way, and the benefit of bringing the data model next to the data, and when we can't find something, oh, right, either it's false data or it's something we don't understand. And in the beginning, there's more we don't understand until we get all that covered. Okay, keep going. All right, so there's what you can do is you have what's called a polyhierarchy, and you can see BMW 228 being part of the car types and also being part of the car models. And I think I shared this with you last week, where in working with the central bank, we were cataloging time series, and it is possible to be able to get to those time series and drill down to find out what assets you have using these different hierarchical structures. So if I'm coming from a region point of view, I could see all the time series related to Pofada, or I could be coming from a subject area point of view. I want to see GDP. I can navigate that data catalog in many different ways if you've got a powerful enough taxonomy. Okay, I think if there aren't any questions on that, I'd like to hand over to Esty, and she can start with helping our data citizens progress along the semantic chain.
Thanks, Howard. We're going to do a brief review just of the sustainability use case JG presented last week. So just go through, remind you what we told you last week if you might have missed it, or just as a reminder.
Super, thanks, ST. So yeah, really powerful to be able to just offer a use case back to the DAMA community for the intention of collaboration and collaborative learning. So super excited about that. As we said, it's a sustainability use case, but what I wanted to highlight is the word sustainability actually at its core means an improvement in transparency. And I would actually hesitate to guess that every single person on this call, if you think about the fundamental of what your client is looking for you to offer value to them, it's an improvement of transparency, either to get it, to improve it, to iterate it, to trust it. And so it's a sustainability use case, but I really feel like it has applicability to all parties on this call. So I'm super excited to present this to you, active and live, as Esty said. Currently underway, and you'll see that we've even made some changes since last week. Next slide, please. So the why behind sustainability, we had a look at this. There are multiple thought leaders, and they asked, the speculate is, oh my word, the construct of business value, if one adopts sustainability initiatives, actually increases. So this is not a cost, this is not a reporting requirement, this actually becomes a business imperative, because this is the thesis, is post a particular point in time where there was a purposeful sustainability intervention, did business value increase? Now, this is a data problem on a spectacular scale, because there's a moment in time, and you want to watch behaviors on either side of that moment in time and see whether they change, one. Number two, if they do change, you want to form an opinion of their value. Now, some of these are easy. They're financial metrics. They go up and down. But some of them are non-financial metrics. Some of them don't even have ERPs looking after them. And so that's where the data complexity comes in, is, oh my goodness, how do I curate and ensure that my data is comparable across this particular moment in time? Because if this thesis is true, oh my word, you cannot afford not to be investing in sustainability initiatives. If it is false, then you need to be doing that in a circumspect way. And so the jury is out. And this is the kind of questions that now you'll see from a CEO. So next slide is, because sustainability brings businesses together and it looks across all aspects of them, ranging from your, from your manufacturing to your production, or from your sourcing to your production to your distribution to your cash collection. It literally spans all aspects of business. And then, oh shucks, it can span both upstream and downstream suppliers. The CEOs are like grappling with questions, and we decided that we're just going to touch on two of these each week. And this week we're going to touch on the middle two, which is the CEOs asking, or the C-suite question is, can we start our sustainability initiative where we are? Please don't tell me I have to do 100 things that are going to cost $1 million, and then all of a sudden, only then can I start. So can we filter sustainability to what is important for us to start and confidently track how this changes over time? And so that question is informing some of the ways in which the solutions must work. But I'm hoping as data professionals, you get quite excited because you're going, well, if a CEO wants certainty in terms of how things are changing over time, absolutely. And then in particular, how do we protect ourselves from greenwashing? Now, this is a term not many would be familiar with. I wasn't, but it says, how do we make sure that we are not assigning carbon credits to more than one place? How do we go about ensuring that when we do have an initiative that is resulting in crediting for the sustainability, how do you make sure that nobody's actually recording that on multiple initiatives? And that is a key question at the moment. It's quite difficult to answer. So that's the third one. And then just another question I'll just highlight. This is just for context. I need a coherent sustainability strategy that accommodates my entire business. And it allows divisions to start where they are, but not limited to those that are already using sustainability as a competitive advantage. And this is such an interesting question. We found this, we're working for a group of companies, a manufacturing concern, 7 divisions. 2 divisions are at sea with respect to sustainability, but one of the divisions is actually using it as a competitive advantage. And the last thing the competitive advantage division wants to be done is like not, have an initiative that is not useful to them. So how do you actually then drill down for this thing to be specific? So kind of the C-suite questions that are coming, these are quite encouraging from a data professional's perspective, because you know that if your data is well curated, well cared for, you can start to answer some of these questions. Esty, next slide, please. This is something that we'll unpack a little bit more in the last week. So remember, data manager, data citizen this week, next week's data professional, and the last week is data executive, which is, well, where's the value? And so just briefly, what I want to show you, there's a timeline here. There's an acceleration of value, and I will unpack that for us in 2 weeks' time. But suffice to say that between today and in 8 years' time, there's what would I call it, like an acceleration that is thank you so much, Betty. There's an acceleration that is, it's actually exponential. So I'll unpack that for us, and we'll do that in the last week. Next slide, please, ST. And fundamentally, we're engaging with a client, and I mentioned last week that this is one of these interesting engagements where you start off consulting to a client because they're at sea with their data initiative, and then they look at you and go, oh my word, I've never realized that there are people that can curate the data like you can. And then you say, well, I've never realized there are people that hold IP like you do. And all of a sudden there's a synergistic kind of blend, and all of a sudden we're building a data product together. And this is no longer a time and materials project. This is actually, what needs to be true to come together and build a sustainability product that is data driven, but also meets the needs of clients. So quite an exciting development for our company, because we are now partnering with what used to be a client and now a partner with respect to the software as a service. Last week I told you.
Sorry, George, if I ask a question, you call it as software as a service, but is it not data as a service?
Well,
it should not be DAAS, or you specifically calling it SAAS? Is there a further bit to it?
So we've found an interesting challenge in that. So how do we're specifically calling it software as a service? And could I pick that point up in 3 or 4 slides? Because what started off as data as a service, because of the way in which we're handling master data, has forced us to potentially consider this to be a software product, not just data. It's data plus application. So can I answer it then? And then if I've got my terminology wrong, could you maybe just call me on it at that point? Is that okay?
Sure.
Cool. So there's a software product here that we need to couple sustainability to economics. That's a mapping problem. Then pivoting, that's a dimensional problem. Trending, we all understand that. And then this construct of frameworks, that's actually a reference data mapping challenge. So those 4 things are what makes up the offering that we're needing to take on. So those are the kinds of challenges that this product brings, the sustainability initiative brings. Next slide, please. And I touched on 2 frameworks last week. For those that were on the call, you might remember me referring to SASB. You'll see that one sitting right in the middle. It was launched in 2011. It's now It really has taken on a major role in the sustainability standards. So it's there, strong. And you might remember me also talking about the top right-hand corner one, that little blue dot, the GRI. But the bottom line here is that there is a spectrum of standards. And Esti just now we'll cover, when we try and overlay these standards, we'll see that some of them have different jobs, some of them have overlapping jobs, some of them don't even know about each other. And that remains a challenge when it comes to bringing these things together. And remember what I said, one of the key business cases here is in South Africa, we have lots of businesses who are local entities of an international body. So the sustainability requirements have got two elements to them. How do I meet the sustainability requirements in country? And then how do I meet the sustainability requirements of my holding company? And is there any way that one can do that using the same data, but just pivot it such that it is speaking to the needs of two different audiences? And so that's the challenge on the table. Cool. Next one. So Howard raised this a little bit earlier. It's like, we've done so much work on all these data modeling tools, and Erwin and so on, and please tell us that these things are still useful. And we have found a data model to be our true north. Without it, our conversations just go all over the place. So we've put a data model down for this entire solution, and next week we'll be talking about the data professional. And actually, we're super excited because his company's on the call, and we've been working closely with our data professional to get this right. And so we have data modeling, and what I'd like to do is, Esti, I'd like to hand it back to you here, is because even within the course of this week, we have evolved our data model to handle some of the use cases that were otherwise we couldn't see, or we could see them, but we just didn't know how to handle them. And so, Esti, can I ask that you just quickly give us a run through of the data modeling changes during the course of the week, and then I'm going to give us some perspectives from our data citizen. Thanks, Esti.
Cool. So yes, we've had some changes to our data model just in this week. So if you think of the previous slide, we've decoupled some items in order to handle a use case that came up. And having the data model and speaking to that and having that in mind has been so core to conversations with every level of individual that we encounter, all of the personas we encounter. So it feels like, yes, the true north, the one screen we continually come back to. Now, last week, I did discuss some data concerns with the different frameworks. So there is some grain issues. So the level of detail is different parent-child, child and parent. Where should we link them? There's also some overlap. So some things are called the same, but different things are called similar. And it's very semantic. It's very on that very specific meaning that gets added to the information. We also did cover more semantic clarity, ongoing from glossaries, thesaurus, what we already have, and then looking to eventually potentially have taxonomy and ontology for the client, and realizing that their work that they started in Excel is in essence almost the start of an ontology as well. This, and then Gigi, I'm gonna hand back to you to give us talk about the day in the life of our data citizen that we're working with.
Super. Okay, so again, remember we've got a system.
Sorry, do you mind if I ask you a question?
Of course, thank you.
So I was interested there in terms of you're sort of referring to the data model as your true north, but is the data model a true north, or is the ontology or the simplification of that being the concept map more appropriate? And I understand you may transition into that, but it's almost like you, and we understand you're using it very well in terms of communication. That's what a data model is, and it's very helpful. But if you look at that previous graph, there's that idea of a concept map, that also allows you that type of visualization. Very, I suppose, similar to what ST was demoing in Grapho. Is that where you will you move to, or you still feel that the data models you'll go to?
No, I think it's a great question, Harder. I guess it's got to do with in a sea of uncertainty and being washed from side to side by the client. I think the word true north maybe is incorrect. It's an anchor point. It's an anchor point that we are using right now. But as we've been going through this ontology process, we're realizing that we need several anchor points, and we're quite excited about this next one. So I think the word true north was a bit overstated. It's an anchor point. We're holding on to it tight because it gives us perspective when we just for us to keep track of where we are.
And I think the point you bring in is very important, because we've always seen the value of a simplified or a conceptual model in data modeling. As you move up the semantic chain, one would want to understand how to present the same detail, the same concepts in an ontology or a facet. So sort of similar to that one diagram where we had with the different computers and things like that, and the facets, it's about finding that mechanism to communicate.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're going to do today is just stop for a moment and ask you to think about your data citizen. So I'm going to express my data citizen, and I summarize him as FOB. He fell off his bike. So we've not been able to meet as often as we like because he fell off his bike and he really hurt his ankle. And so we've had an injured data citizen, which means that we've had to really look after our data citizen with kit gloves, and I mean that endearingly. We've got the most incredible client who's got very rich contextual knowledge, but very light on how to manage this from a data perspective. But the beauty is this particular client picks up on our proposed terminology. So I'm going to show you a slide, and maybe just a next slide, and then I'll come back to this one. This is where we found ourselves with this client. Is Excel, right? Is we had a reference, master, meta, crosstab, soup. And this is our data citizens' pride and joy. It was and is a delivery that is unique. It is the real power is the way it maps, and our data citizen had spent 4 iterations. This was on version 4 when we inherited this. This is version 4 of a Excel spreadsheet. But what it tries to do, and does a very good job, but it's got master data in yellow. It's got a reference data in yellow. It's got master data in green. It's got metadata in purple. And all of this has been put together in a glamorous crosstab that has these relationships both in line and vertically, because that's now how they bring in the framework. So we've got these business terminology mixes all the way into a crosstab mix match. And then the beauty was, oh shucks, the column is also part of a hierarchy, but it was really difficult to portray that. So it's just implied. And so I want you to think of I am pretty sure that this is not a problem that we're discovering for the first time. I'm pretty sure that there are people on this call going, I can relate to a data citizen who has given me this problem to solve. In fact, on the call, we might have some data citizens who are talking to other people who are trying to help them. And you've got this amazingly complex spreadsheet. And when we look at each other and we go, because of course the data citizen is saying, I really, really need to scale. I need to add another thing. But oh my word, as soon as I add something, this whole thing breaks. So please, can we just add something more, but it mustn't break. And this is this level of maturity that we find ourselves. So Esty, can you just go one step back, please? One slide back is we find the we find our data citizen incredibly strong contextually, and they consult and build narratives off visuals, and they do an amazing job. But oh my word, they've got it this far and it's working, but it's a bit rickety, and oh shucks, please don't try and balance those numbers, because they just don't balance. And so you've got this I think it's almost like a maturity point in a project where you can get up to this point with whatever tools you like. Excel's a great one, but then all of a sudden you reach that scale point where you're going, the moment I add anything more, I break everything spectacularly. And this client was at that point. And so the client was very gracious. They picked up on the word of how we differentiated between master data and reference data, and introduced this concept of metadata being their magic. And we're saying, well, actually, we had to adjust some of our terminology to say some of your mapping is, we're going to set that down as master data, and then some is not, and so on. So we've had this iteration, but I want to highlight, before I move on to any other slide, this is not a technical discussion. This is a discussion of respect. It's a discussion of understanding that you are now dealing with some person's IP that they've generated in their head, and it is so hard to maintain. And the person is saying, because it is so hard to maintain, it must be so amazingly complex and therefore differentiate us to another stratosphere that nobody can follow. And this is where you've got to gently take the client to say that the complexity is not something that you want to be competing on. You want to get it simple so that you can compete. And that's been a massive maturing process, because the client doesn't just want to see you as a data partner come in and literally automate everything that they've been doing for the last 2 years and just make it look like all of their effort has been for nothing. And moreover, they get really concerned because they're going, oh my word, what happened to my competitive advantage? I thought that my competitive advantage was sitting in amongst this complex thing that I've now evolved over time. And so the third from bottom point is something that we think is, this the controlled vocabulary picture with the arrow. We see this climbing semantic plateaus is you hold, the data team needs to handhold with the data citizen and reinforce the value of going up every step, because as you take your data citizen up this curve, they need to start letting go of some things. And Esti, now's a good time. Maybe you can just take us to the next slide again.
Sorry, JG.
Yeah, Howard. Sorry, hand up.
We can just share an experience if it's okay with you. Do you want
Please,
to just?
No. That's awesome. Maybe I'll just all I was going to say, Howard, is the client. Asking the client to let go of a spreadsheet is not an elementary exercise. We had to understand what's happening in the spreadsheet and give them options and alternatives to come with us. Had to build trust. And so that's where we find ourselves right now. Is the process of the client realizing that they need to let this go in order to, you sometimes you've got to let go of you've got to be confident enough to lose sight of the shore to discover new territories. So this is where we find ourselves hard. I would love to know if you've seen this before.
Yeah, so I actually can talk to this actual scenario. BG was with me as well. We actually brought him in to help him and a few of his workers, but we were battling to implement data governance within an organization, and people really felt that they were doing well, thank you very much. And, so why do we need you? And there was one company, one area, one department that I had to work really hard with. It was in the financial markets arena. And there was a lady that was really good, really sharp. She had a doctorate in financial markets. And she had been coding for 4 or 5 years in VBA, in Excel. And this is one thing when they start doing it like this, but when they start coding in VBA and doing all sorts of amazing transformations in the backend now, it's not just reading what's on the screen or what's in Excel, but it's double Excel hell. It's Excel hell on steroids. And then she retired, and the manager called me in one day and said, it's actually been raised by internal audit as a risk. This is a risk because we have a person that's been working so hard, so long, and she had done a good job. I mean, let's not underestimate, they had basically run the department on Excel. There were 2 developers that had run, 2 data citizens that had coded, and they knew the markets backwards, what the code was. There was a total of 200 and something spreadsheets that when we finally cataloged everything and said, this is the scope of work that needed to be replaced. And then we went through a process of getting into all these different VBAs, trying to understand what it meant. And we had 3 guys pouring through VBA code. And what struck me the most was one of the guys that we worked with. I was going through his Excel and asking him how it worked, and there was a currency exchange rate and stuff like that. And as I sort of recreated it, I couldn't get it to balance. And I went back to him and said, I'm battling here. And he said, oh, jeepers, I've got something that I've hidden away, and that was the current exchange rate that hasn't been updated for 6 months. And this was the story that they had. First of all, you couldn't talk to them about master data and reference data. They weren't that keen on hearing it. They wanted to get out of the mess, and you had to constantly say, okay, now if we did master data about all the financial indices that we have, then we can control this with the exchange rates, and we don't get into this type of thing. To a point where some of the people, even though they were on leave for writing exams, they had to come in at 4 o'clock in the morning to actually get the Excel refreshed so that they could go home and study, and other people wouldn't be upset with them. So that was Excel hell on scale, you know. But nice, each time you found something, then you can say, can you see this is what master data, and we could replace it in a master data management or reference data or whatever it is. And so they learned with you on the journey, and you had to show them. You actually had to give them examples of how you could tidy it up and clean it up.
Oh, thanks so much for sharing that. And yes, it just, a data project has an emotional angle to it, and this is where you hit it. You hit it front and center here, and if you play it well, you get the person on sides, and if you play it badly, you get like a prickly response. And so one of the things we realized is before we take any spreadsheets away, we have to create an environment where this can be maintained. And Howard, this is why we feel like we've gone from a DAS to a SAS, because we've realized that the complexity of managing these relationships, particularly as we start to cross those frameworks, you would have seen there's a timeline with lots of frameworks on them. And as soon as we need to bring in more than one framework, we cannot rely on Excel anymore. We almost need to be relying on an app that visualizes, brings in like terms, matches them, proposes a score, gets them to link. All of a sudden, we're busy leaving the realm of Excel as we look to take on the business problem of handling this framework joining. We almost need an app to handle the framework joining. So Howard, that's why we're quite purposeful about the fact that we've probably left what is a data problem, and we're now, because of us realizing that we need to get these graph type, we don't even know if it's graph, but let's just imagine that we're going to get a stronger and stronger ontology, because this actually is the basis of the client's ontology. It's using some taxonomies that are in yellow. It's got their own taxonomy, which is a bit of a master data thing. And they're joining it. They've got context. Those little yeses give massive context. And so we realized that this is actually the start of the ontology. And in order for us to help them maintain it in this method, we have to leave Excel and offer them a service. And so how that's why we've we've been forced to think, like, we thought we were data practitioners coming in here doing a good job. Now all of a sudden we have to find suitable partners who can dev front ends to allow master data management opportunities, or we need to find a master data management vendor. But this is a startup business. This is not it's not an enterprise trying to do this. So if we bring any enterprise solutions to the table, the costs are really prohibitive in the startup phase. So they're saying to us, what is just enough to get us through, allow us to scale, etc. So maybe a question to you, Howard. Is that a good enough reason to change our demarcation of solution from a DaaS to a SaaS?
Initially, I don't think so, but I think it would require a few more discussions, because at the end of the day, the product that you're providing to your consumers is data, be it insights and stuff like that. Of course, they will help you configure your ontology and build it, but you'd have almost the XBRL layout of a balance sheet. You're going to have the frameworks, and you're going to have to allow, to an extent, someone to say this line is related to this concept or this node in ontology, which is almost similar to making use of a graph database or Grapho to model the data. Are you selling? Is your focus selling software, or is your focus selling data? Now, you're going to have configuration. That's, I mean, you can't have a data product without any configuration, but at the end of the day, your value chain is delivering products, delivering data products. Unless you're saying, well, I'm going to deliver you something else that will help you transfer, I mean, again, so is it user data that you said?
I mean, I guess the moment we've brought in the construct of a application, I felt like all of a sudden it's transcended being a data as a service. I think that might be a naive perspective, because sometimes you need an app to surface the data. So that was our mental model, is that the moment we having to now support a portal, manage clients, it's a master data portal, and it's it's the way in which we handle API interfaces. That's been the mental model, is because we've now all of a sudden handling that, do we now like leave this construct of a data product? But I hear you saying no, and I'm going, okay, then I think that my mental model of a data product needs a bit of work.
You'll always have master data management to an extent on any the building of any data product. So because you're going to be linking it to, and you're going to be providing context, but your end delivery to customers is data, visualizations, aggregated data, exchange of data. That's the service you're providing. You're providing to your customers. They bring the data in, it gets transformed, it gets aggregated, it gets insights, analytics, and it delivers data. You basically got a data flow here. Let's say, for example, if you're using R or something else just to configure reference data, are you selling them the package to edit it, or is your value to work with the data?
It's a data product. Yeah. Cool. So that's great feedback. Maybe the word SaaS then is not accurate. Then it is a DaaS.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Right now it is a data product, and I mean, we have thought about steering this thing in a way to become perhaps more software as a service when we perhaps think about portals and so on from the client's perspective. But I think until Howard is quite right, until that point, we might have the conversation again. But it is right now the value comes from the actual data. Yeah.
I mean, if you give them visuals, JG, let's say you put it on Power BI and you give them R or whatever it is, and they can interact with it. Yes, it's an application, but the delivery is insights.
Yeah.
No, that is true. The delivery is either insights or it's a stream of data for them to ingest. But it's always it's never going to be a physical thing. It's always going to be.
Yeah, well, I think it might become, if the packaging works in such a way that it is something that people can log on to, do a few things, and actually get all their value from that from that interface or from that channel. Then I think there could be arguments for having this kind of thing looked at as a software as a service.
I think that the thing that I like is there's one bunch of people that are really great and they're doing some good work, and it's called jobs to be done, and it's a way of thinking, and they keep on asking you, are you satisfying someone's job to be done? Now, JG, your customers, what's their job to be done?
So cool. I think for the purpose of this discussion, it's I would wind that back. So Howard, back to your previous question. So yeah, I think we should change that slide to read DAS. So cool. Thank you for that perspective. So Esty, maybe just next slide, and I'm very aware of time, Howard. So we've got maybe 5 minutes to go and a lot more to cover. We can always cover some of the detail next week. But I thought that this slide is a really interesting one because it reveals where we are with the client. Excel's been a great place to start, and I can't imagine a better tool to start. But we are now needing to take the training wheels off and take the client with us as we start to cobble these blocks together to enable a use case. Howard, and you referred back to an ontology holding inference and relationships and references, and we just get a sense that the more we spend time with these frameworks and we're trying to get a sense as what they're looking to do, there's such an inference relationship between these two. And so maybe for the parties, maybe for everybody attending this call, is as we progress down this solution, we get more and more certain that forming an opinion on an ontology for this client is going to be a key enabler. And the problem with that is it's forcing us as data professionals to really tidy up our game with, what's the best thing for the client. And I'm feeling that there's some of my experience is a bit light on this particular aspect of data management. And so we are running hard to honor the client as we guide and lead them to be able to manage, to get themselves to an ontology, because they have a very basic one. It's in Excel right now, and we're looking to lift it and potentially put it in slightly stronger products so that it can grow. But Howard, that maybe is that from a data citizen perspective, that might be a good place just to. I think what we tried to do today is sensitize everybody on the call to how we've experienced interacting with our data citizen. I'm hoping that everybody on the call was able to visualize their data citizen, or they are the data citizen. And I was hoping that this then gave a perspective of, as we collaborate together to make this better and to bring in more stronger products that are required when one matures up the controlled vocabulary curve, there is a level of relationship management that takes place, particularly at the data citizen level, to ensure that you take them with, that you hold the context, and that you underpin them as a data citizen. So I'm feeling like this is not a bad juncture to just potentially maybe stop for some questions or some comments with respect to a data citizen. And I'm hoping that parties on the call have not been worried about our data citizen, but have been reflecting about theirs.
So JG, I wonder, there's that one slide that I think Esty was going to talk to about the move between normal graph, knowledge graph, and knowledge graph with inference. That's the
That's so perfect. Maybe you can just pick this up for us, Howard.
Because this is almost what I battle with when I build data strategies with people. And I use the SWOT technique, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, what they are good at is understanding their strengths, where they're battling, a weakness is almost their friction. The opportunity is where I battle with, in terms of saying, can you see what you can do with your data? And threats, they're hearing about people, so the education on what can you do is hard. It's hard to open that vision. And this one is one that I like doing with people, metadata people, and saying, can you see the plane graph on the right-hand side, which is, it's got 2 pairs of shoes, Converse and bike, that may be Nike and Converse, and there's the colors, indigo and a celebrity, and they're going to bring them together. And this is the graph that they created of some of their data. Now, when we added the knowledge graph, notice we've added a shoe ontology and we've added a color taxonomy. Now that points to JG's one of SASB and all the other GRI, all the other ones that I've already forgotten all the acronyms. But notice how we're now bringing this ontology. Let's make it an example of a sustainable. We're bringing SASB and we're bringing someone else. Now, all of a sudden, we can start saying, oh, shucks, so S1 is actually of color indigo. And indigo is blue and it's cold. Now, yes, we saw indigo there the last time, and there would be tacit knowledge of the hierarchy going to blue, cold, or orange and warm, and also to the fact that this is a sports shoe or a high boot or whatever it is, and how these relate. So I'm hoping people can see already that in the data, in the graph database, we have our data model, our metadata semantic, and our taxonomy structures augmenting the original data and giving us an amazing ability to understand what that graph was all about. And I have shared last week about, let's just filter it for a company and see everything to do with the company, or filter it for a specific boot type or whatever it is. And all of a sudden the graph becomes more meaningful. But the next one is where we start bringing into machine learning. And now we can start with our inferencing, and you can see how we can start inferring all sorts of things and relating to not just the one term that we had, but mapping different boots and shoes and sneakers together and looking at almost segmentation that we have. So it provides you the segmentation and the categorization that machine learning needs, and even statistical forecasting needs, and to be understanding what's doing well, what's not doing so well. So I just keep on getting blown away by how much more we get when we bring these two worlds together and allowing people to talk. And of course, your data citizen that's going to be doing analytics on it, they need to see this. They need to be able to see these hierarchies and elements like that. And again, a lovely way of representing it. And so that's what people can get out of moving up the semantic plateaus. This is the type of value you get onto your data, and one should be able to pivot now again across different sustainability frameworks. So you can go any one, you can choose any one that's appropriate to your line on the balance sheet and see how the different ones map out.
I mean, that just really, it's so interesting when you said on the SWOT analysis, the opportunity is just, it's so difficult to articulate that. But when you start to see it through the lens of layering your data up through the semantic chain, you are like this picture really illustrates to me the multiplying effect that you get from that, and making the data available to the tools that are there. So Howard, thank you. That really has landed. I mean, I feel inspired, because it's not like it's easy to get these damn ontologies out, and each element takes debate and consideration. And that's maybe my closing thought is the data citizen is that person who's going to continue to give you context, continue to give you really insightful IP. Their IP is all about the industry they're in. They know this stuff. And you as a data practitioner working closely with them, not antagonizing them, honoring them through their Excel evolution is the steps of how you retain buy-in with them. So I'm hoping, I mean, that message was clear for me. I'm hoping that message was clear for the participants of today's seminar. So maybe then that's an opportunity to.
We've got some questions, JT. We got. So that's Rob. Rob's got a question. Rob, you're on mute.
Okay.
I hope this was a good conversation.
I'm the business guy. Okay, I've always been, as Howard will attest to, and I just wonder if your engagement so far, are we not widening a gap again between technology and business needs? I know that what you're doing is admirable in trying to make pictures like this illustrate what the data model looks like in terms of the particular customer or industry or stuff like that. But do you have, like, in terms of what you're trying to sell and what you're trying to motivate and what you're trying to feed back to the guy that's actually responsible for the purse strings, exactly what you're doing and how it's progressing in terms that they will understand? How would you remember this from the from the Visual Banker project? I'll give an example. I inherited a new team of people, and a fantastic, and I mean fantastic, sale was made to one particular bank in South Africa. And I was invited, in fact, I think I invited myself to go to a meeting with the client. And we sat in the room, and after we actually, just before we decided to break, I actually said, so who is the business owner of this particular initiative? And they said, no, it's, I can't remember the guy's name, Howard, you will remember the guy, but he was, sorry?
Jan.
He's a techie. He was like the dev manager and stuff like that. And I said, well, so you're delivering this framework and stuff like that, but it has no business content value at all, and it's going to fail. And I kept on harping on, and eventually one of the sales guys said to me, Rob, shut up. You're gonna blow the sale. And yeah, well, so I went out and I didn't come back after that because I would have blown the sale apparently, but the project failed. And I believe that one of the many reasons, in spite of all the hard work that was done from a technical perspective, is the business kept on saying, when am I going to see the value?
Yeah. And Rob, if I could answer quickly, and then I'll hand over to JG. But we're actually taking this talk in 4 segments, and the last one is the data executive, and in there, JG will be presenting, and that's almost what we see as the role of the CDO, is to explain to business what the value is. And cool. We should never take our eye off the value, as you've rightly pointed out.
Delighted to hear that, and I won't ask any further.
No. But I'd love
the session will be very useful, and I would love to attend.
So what I want to just share with you is this one is for what we refer to as our data citizen, meaning it's your sort of business guy that has to interact with the data, and so he's the SME. And so he's the one that's going to give you the business knowledge to be able to set up Visual Banker. You know, he's the one who's going to give you the business rules and things like that. And so there's a level of help, support, common language that we have to get. And I think that was JG's message today, is we can come with all these fancy terms, but be careful, because they've been doing a great job in Excel, and you could be throwing it out the window, which is sort of what you don't want. So that's almost why I've chosen these. When we present topics like an ontology, you have a very different presentation by persona. and it goes to that. But JG, maybe you can comment on that, because I know you wanted to talk through some of those things.
Yeah, so Rob, I really would love to, please diarize the fourth week, where this is the second. So the fourth week is the data executive trying to justify and ensure that the project never loses sight of the value proposition to client, and not this utopian value proposition of right now. And so what is really this project is real and live right now. As the clients are expressing, like, some are feeling oversold, some are feeling that's not what I wanted. So it's that never lose sight of the job to be done for that particular client. But what we're realizing is, if one can get the data structured in a manner that allows the client to evolve with you, you can take your value proposition from an ESG sustainability report, which is mandatory. It's a governance requirement. It happens annually. And now it's just a bespoke competition amongst vendors to generate a report. It's a commodity. Great, price it as such. If you can then ask the client to lift their gaze to say, actually, this is a business imperative, not to tick a governance box. We want to show you that actually alignment to sustainable initiatives is actually the best thing for business. It's got a multiplying effect. There's a kicker, there's this, there's that. It's like, oh my word, okay, well then fine, but then show me how that works, and then how do you keep the data still? So love it. 4 weeks time, or the last one is that one, Howard, maybe swapping it around, but I actually think it's right, is let's get the tech stuff landed and then link it back to the business case. But so Robert, would be great to have that detail. I guess what I was hoping to, the message conveyed in today's session is, the chances are high that your client will be starting in Excel. Start there with them and go gently with them as you evolve them up the maturity curve, up the controlled vocabulary requires you to sometimes embrace some product that they're not used to, but take them with. And that's where we find ourselves, is we're guiding and leading our data citizen, and they're holding a lot of context. So thank you for that question, Rob, and I'm hoping that we can do that justice in 2 weeks' time.
Well, thank you for the answer. Yeah, good stuff. Thank you. Well answered.
Thanks, Rob. Don, I was hoping that you may have a contribution in terms of what these graphs add on to some analysis.
No, today I was just listening. I think
Okay.
it's very interesting. But I think the kinds of data sets that we deal with, for most types of economic data sets, things are a little bit clearer. But yeah, I'm interested to learn about this.
Okay, great. Thanks, Don. Any other questions, guys? Otherwise, I'll hand it over to Mr. Bolton. Paul, any questions from yourself?
Did you mean PG?
Yes, I meant you.
Oh, no, I think it's a good conversation. Valid sort of inquiry there by Rob.
Yeah.
Because it is not a trivial discussion point. These things are cool, and sometimes they are difficult to just bring back to value. So that's going to be a good session.
Yeah.
But nothing else from me.
Good. Thank you very much. All right. Oh, Mr. Bolton. No, not PG. ST, thanks very much. Thanks for everything. JG, also thanks. Yeah, it's and maybe just to share, I know ST, we had a great session today with her, and really just saw, the lights and her understanding coming on and just growing in this new approach in the learning. So ST, thanks for all the commitment and for all the effort.
No, it's definitely good to watch, because with the data citizen, really like to say about the empathy that we really need to have with somebody that might not know the world like we do. No, it's been good to watch and observe. Been good.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Howard. Thanks, JG.
Okay. Mr. Bolton, you can close off if you're still around. I think he's not. Okay, guys, I'll wrap up. But just again, thank you for everybody. Just as I'll do the write-up tomorrow, and then Debbie will do some editing, and then we'll post on LinkedIn probably on Monday sometime. So thanks everybody for attending. Sorry about going a little bit late. And guys, have a wonderful time. It's fantastic to have you here. Great.
Thanks, Howard.
Thanks,
Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thanks, Esty.